Hey everybody, Charlie here with my good friend Alex. We are live and we are talking about mental visualization in sport and other things. This can be used for learning anything new, not just sports.
Practice with
Yeah,
your mind. Yeah.
exactly. So let's jump right in.
Mental imagery is one of the most important skills that the very best mental imagery is one of the most important skills that the very best athletes turn to in order to reach peak performance. But it's a skill that's often misunderstood and misused. So this video will teach you all you need to know about this skill so that you can gain the mental edge and level up your performance. So what is mental imagery? And where did it come from? Mental imagery is the process of creating a mental image or intention of what you want to happen or achieve. It's also commonly known as visualization or mental rehearsal. In its simplest form, mental imagery is about seeing what is not already there or in existence yet, and a way to pre-experience successful moments. The origins of mental imagery can be traced back to ancient Greece with Aristotle's concept of phantasma, which is a term roughly translated as mental image. Phantasmata were images that appeared in the psyche, but Aristotle pondered on this idea more in terms of general memory and perception, rather than imagining desired outcomes into existence. Since then, mental imagery has gone on quite.
Oh yeah, sorry. Before we continue, shout out to Sam Martin Peak Performance channel for the video. So actually,
Yeah.
I was just
Thanks,
thinking,
man.
it's a very well made video. I like the editing and the music and the.
Yeah,
All right.
you like the music in the yeah. I think it's
Okay.
did a good job here.
Yeah.
We could learn a thing or two.
Yeah, certainly.
From being conceptualized as the mind's eye in the 1387 Canterbury Tales, to explain how those who have become blind only see through the eyes of their mind, to then becoming a staple meditative practice across various religions. But its growth as a key psychological skill within sports has only come about very recently, after mental imagery has been studied through various psychological lenses throughout the 1800s and 1900s. It was then in
Pause
1938
it
that Coleman.
before he gets into the studying. I think one of the lesser known things, but maybe kind of understood at this point, is a lot of really high level athletes, Olympic athletes, do this as a matter of course as part of their training. It's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Sports psychologists employ it as a technique to like reinforce confidence and skill. And like I remember watching Olympics. I don't remember the cycles of when they land. Maybe 4 years ago, it was snowboarders, and before they're taking their runs, this Japanese snowboarder was literally had his eyes closed and was like spinning around in circles with his hands out, visualizing exactly what he was going to do on the half pipe before he took his run.
Dude, I imagine that's like the perfect, I think we have an example of this later in another video, but I think that's like the perfect thing where mental imagery is like maybe most useful is like when you're manipulating your body in just midair, like I imagine that like those, like getting that right must be so hard. And the mental aspect of pulling off those tricks seems like, yeah. But even, didn't you have a basketball example too that you mentioned before?
Oh, there's tons. You
Yeah.
can do it for anything, and frankly, we'll let them keep going. But I'm pretty sure it's actually not limited to the physical things. Make the most sense because your reference point for your own body is obvious, like arms, legs, head, feet, toes. Like you can think of those. But whenever you actually boil down anything, including intellectual subjects like mathematics or engineering, you're essentially building mental models, and there's some form of abstraction you're using at some level to understand how things work conceptually. So as you start to do this type of practice, you can apply it to literally anything.
Yeah.
You just have to be a bit more creative. Like Richard Feynman, famous physicist, he's literally famous because it's how he would problem solve. He would make abstractions of supposedly complex problems, and then understanding the fundamental elements of them that exist as rules of physics, he would relate whatever the rule of physics was to a literal example he'd create in his head with imagery. Like this is not a real example because I'm not a physicist or nearly as smart as him, but he'd be like, "Oh, an electron, when it's behaving this in this way, it reminds me it's like three fuzzy balls colliding and getting entangled with each other." That's not a real example. Please forgive me, but it sounds dumb to hear him describe it that way. But that seeing those things, the way those balls would interact and get entangled with each other, literally helps him understand how to manipulate these ideas and use them and apply them. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Anyway,
the way it makes sense to me, at least for the physical things, is that like it doesn't seem obvious that just thinking about something would make you better at it, but I think when you look at the brain and how it works and how it learns, and we'll probably get into this in the video, like there's not a huge difference between like visualizing doing a thing and then your body actually doing the thing. If you practice with visualization enough,
Right.
it's a pretty close parallel to actually just going out and doing it and practicing in the real world.
Yeah, I think that's what we're about to find out. But I mean, I agree with you, because just imagine what dreaming is like. Imagine if you've ever had a really absorbing dream where you're doing something complex, like in the dream, like you're navigating a building or you're swimming or you're something that in the dream, moment to moment has all of the constituent sensations that would be involved in that activity. And then you wake up and it wasn't real, but you were still living it out, So
yeah, and then with the mental visualization, you're activating like the same neural pathways, I'd imagine, that you're doing when you do it, for real. So
literally, yeah, they
Yeah.
fire. They said they measure this. They both will fire if you're imagining the behavior and doing the behavior.
yeah,
Let's actually one more thing on that, and then we'll let it go, because he's gonna bring it up again later. It kind of makes sense, because let's let it go. I'll bring it up later.
Within sports has only come about very recently, after mental imagery has been studied through various psychological lenses throughout the 1800s and 1900s. It was then in 1938 that Coleman Griffith, noted as the first ever sports psychologist, started working for the Chicago Cubs. His work paved the way for a slow but increasing sense of importance surrounding the need for athletes to prepare their minds as well as their bodies. Today, mental imagery and visualization is seen as one of the key mental skills to give performers at all levels that final edge, given the saturation point we're reaching with our understandings of other areas devoted to maximizing performance, like nutrition, biomechanics, and gameplay analysis. But does it actually work? Right now, there's a forever growing body of psychological research to demonstrate how mental imagery can be used to increase performance across every sport imaginable. But perhaps the most famous study was one conducted at the University of Chicago, in which 3 groups of participants were asked to take a series of free throws. These groups were then separated into 3 conditions. Group 1, who were made to practice free throws every day for an hour. Group 2, who were made to visualize practicing free throws every day for an hour. And Group 3, who did neither of these things. After 30 days, the researchers tested them again and found that Group 1 improved by 24%, and Group 2, the mental imagery group, improved by 23% without even touching a basketball.
that's really interesting.
It's so the percentage is so close that you might even ask, like, is that actually different?
And it's so much easier to just mentally do it than going to find a basketball court. Like, I imagine
I don't know. I don't know if it's easier. There are reasons that's easier from a resource management thing, but I don't know.
Logistically, logistically it's easier, but it does take effort.
I mean, if you think about it, right? So everything you experience is just sensations, and your body your body links them together based on how you choose to link them in sequence, and then it adds meaning through context. So like, you use your arms and legs all day to do various things, and at some level, it's just muscles firing off in different nerve centers of your body. There's no real sense, there's no real meaning or sense behind it or context. But then, your bicep can be used to lift the milk, or help you put away the dishes, or pull the carpet, or pet your dog. But you go to do a specific action, like shoot a basketball, and it's this one motion over and over again, where you're holding your arm this certain way, and the basketball's of a certain weight, and you have a target to get the ball into that hoop, and it requires this one mechanical motion to achieve a goal. It's only then that you have the context where your brain links together certain behaviors in sequence related to an outcome, which is the goal of making the basket, and uses that as a feedback loop to build that ability up. And what I'm trying to get at is that there's no reason those motions to make the basketball are actually interesting or useful or any more quote unquote important than what your body does to put away dishes or pet your dog, except for the context that you've applied to it, the goal and your own personal meaning. And that meaning is what makes your body reinforce the memory and improve at it. The other idea is that all you're doing as you're practicing, especially when you're new at something, somebody can show you something complex and you think you're seeing it, but you're not really. You're only really able to notice a few of those details at that level and absorb them. And after you absorb that little layer and you look at it again, you're able to have a little bit more perspective and a little bit more perspective. As you go and practice, it's precisely what you're doing. You walk away, you try your best to remember what you were shown, and then you try to step through what the motions are, the exercises, and based on your limited ability to sense your way through it, you do that. And objects like the ball and the court and the pavement, the weight of the ball in your hands, the sound, the feeling as you push off the ground and shooting into the basket, those all give you feedback. But you can produce your own feedback in your own head, and there's no reason why one would be different than the other.
I wonder.
That's just what I'm getting to.
Yeah, that makes sense, but I wonder about the limit. Like, so this was 30 days that they talk about here with the group that visualized it versus the group that actually did it. There's got to be a limit where, like, you've got to go out and actually throw the ball into the hoop at some point. You know, like, I wonder, like, I wonder how good they were at basketball to begin with. Because, like, I assume if you've never even done the motion once to throw the ball in the hoop, like, it might be hard to visualize because you don't, like, if you don't even know what you're doing. Like, so I'm curious about that. But also, like, if they had done this for a year, I imagine, because there's the whole point of feedback of, like, are you making the shot or not, and that's got to come into it somehow, like, or it's got to figure in the equation somehow, right? Like, so I feel like if this was a year of just visualizing versus just going on the court and doing it,
just playing, right?
I feel
well,
like
that's the sorry, finish.
well, yeah, I feel like visualizing can't, because you don't get the feedback of missing the shot, you don't get the feedback of actually how it feels, and you don't. I think there still is something to actual muscle memory where and maybe this kind of does, maybe the visualization does still help muscle memory, but, like, actually doing it, I feel like there's got to be advantage there, maybe more than 1%.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Like, maybe in the long term, there's other things aren't being considered where, you know, novelty, like when you're dealing with things in reality, something completely new can happen.
Yeah.
And that, like, you misstep or plant your foot differently, or the ball rebounds differently, and then that gives you a whole new context that you can then learn from and apply. But if you were sitting in a room doing that, all you'd be able to do is, in theory, should be able to do is refine what you've already understood. And just, you might be able to go deeper into that and tweak that and get that tighter, but you shouldn't be able to produce a brand new aspect to the technique without the feedback from physical reality. That's it. That's the theory. But here's the kick of that. I've tried this a little bit, and one time I sat down and tried to do it for guitar playing, and what surprised me, and this is obviously anecdotal, so nobody should really take this to heart. Maybe try it yourself and see if it lines up for you. Is when I sat down to do it, I thought the imagery in my head would be really kind of vague, and just I'd be generically holding an instrument and kind of strumming away. But as I started to rehearse in my head some of these scales I was practicing, I found that it actually felt like there was actually a sense of constraint. Like, I couldn't just in my head just have my hands to be doing whatever they wanted. There was a relationship between me visualizing my first digit or my second digit, and there being a sense of tone that was different, and there also being this awareness of incongruity or congruity. Just like when you feel a cringe, I also would feel that same cringe. So I actually, was surprising to me how much I felt like I was still mapped to a frame with rules, even though I was just in my own head. So it wasn't like fantasy.
Right.
And that would make me believe that, oh, maybe there's some way that the brain is sort of intuiting more than we know about the situation, and helps us, which is why you can drink deeply possibly drink deeply of the mental rehearsal space, because your brain might have kind of more perspective than you think when you sit down to do it.
Yeah, actually, that does part of that makes sense in the guitar context for me, because that's one I'm familiar with, is because, or even basketball, any of these, like when you're playing it for real, your mind is not, unless you try pretty hard, your mind is not 100% focused on the task, right? Like, you could be playing guitar and your mind could be a million miles away thinking of something. You could just, especially when you're practicing scales, you could just be thinking about something totally, you can be watching TV, like, so your mind is not like 100% focused on the task. But when you're visualizing it, and I imagine this must be part of, or a large part maybe of the benefit,
that makes sense,
is your mind is 100% focused on every single motion and how it feels. And how,
that's, I didn't think about that. That's actually, I think that's probably really smart. That's a really good assessment of probably what's happening, because you have to even pull it up in your head. It requires so much focus. You have to get rid of everything else, and that allows you to go deep, kind of.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do hear you though on the question of like long term, like could somebody essentially sit in a room and, given like really, really fundamental knowledge of basketball, can they sit in a dark room with their eyes closed and a year later pop out with some like really strong skills? Like I don't know if you can extrapolate, basically. I don't know if they could extrapolate more complex techniques off of that. However, again, like the example I just gave of me feeling like there was real constraints, you kind of feel like your fingers are moving, your body has a sense of what your fingers can and can't do, and where the joints are, the pressure, the strings, etc. There might be something like that where you kind of know, like if you ask yourself, what happens if I step more to the left and like lower my weight more, you might be surprised that your brain goes, oh, well, then here's what your lower right ab would feel like, and here's how your butt would feel a little bit different, and here's how your center of gravity would feel. You may be surprised at how much feedback your mind is able to provide you.
Yeah. And one last thing on that, luckily it doesn't really matter, because I think, or at least it seems obvious to me, that the best kind of approach would be to do both, right? So like I was just posing the question, like just in the context of this study, if they continued that for a year, which would do better, but like obviously the best approach is to do both, right? Is to, I don't know what the ratio is, 50-50 or 80-20, but you visualize and then you go out in the court and you do both. So I think that's the most important takeaway.
Yeah, there was probably again, no one's gonna sit there and just practice on their own. Although there was two. So first, yes, that's right and smart. I think there was two examples. One is, we covered this a couple of weeks ago. You corrected me. The word is apocryphal, right? Yeah, it's a story that may not be true. Paganini, it's probably an apocryphal story. He at the time was considered so good at violin that people thought he had literally sold his soul to the devil, because he played things that were so fast that even contemporary masters that were his peers were like, I don't understand this man. And also, by the way, I've heard that now like the modern standard is so high that there's like 15-year-old kids who can crush him. Yeah. But anyway, so the apocryphal story is somebody wanted to follow him to find out his secrets, to find out how he trained and how he practiced to get so good. He followed him around all day before this major concert was supposed to happen, and he saw that he didn't pick up his instrument once. And then upon being interviewed or asked, like, what the hell, I didn't see you touch your instrument one time. He's like, I was playing in my head the whole time. On the train I was playing. When I got home and sat in my chair, I was playing. You can achieve much more in your mind than you can in a shorter space of time than you can with your physical instrument. And then the other story was I don't even remember the name. Somebody who wants to look this up can. I'm sure you can find it.
Let us know in the comments.
Vietnamese POW, and he was in jail. He was in prison POW, prison camp, war camp, and he did not go crazy. I think he was practicing golf. And I think there was a film about Christian Bale starred in featuring this guy, just to help somebody Google searching this. I think he practiced golf in his head nonstop while he was a POW. And then when he got out, supposedly he played was taken to go play with some high-ranking people, and they were impressed at how well he did. He's like, he shot like an amazing game after being in prison interred for like half a decade or something. Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Let's hear what they have to say.
And Group 3 didn't improve at all, which was expected. Other studies have demonstrated that visualizing playing the piano activates the region of the brain connected to the finger muscles in the same way that it does for people actually playing the piano. And another showed that following a simple 15-minute mental imagery script can increase the amount of weight athletes can bench press and deadlift. So if it works, what are the actual benefits? Well, many, and ultimately these will feed into improved overall performance, but underneath these lie a number of individual benefits. You've got increased skill development, given that mental imagery can be practiced during times in which an athlete is injured or their body is exhausted or they just want that extra boost. This was key for the late Kobe Bryant. We've all heard stories of the intensity with which he trained, so when his body was physically done for the day, he would spend extra hours in a room on his own playing out every possible shot in the next upcoming match. You've then got increased confidence. If you played out the scenario in your head 10 times, you're going to be far more confident in going through with it or seizing that moment when it arises in real life. And on increasing confidence, it also helps you prepare for tough moments, because mental imagery is not just about the successes, the game-winning shot, or crossing the finish line. It's about understanding that you're going to face particular hurdles and setbacks, and you need to develop a mental roadmap so that when they do arise in real life, you can easily and more successfully get out of them.
So yeah, he's talking about the more rather than just rehearsal, I think, like practicing the specific technique. He's talking about how athletes use this to envision their entire kind of performance throughout a game or whatever they're. And this, like Alex Honnold, the guy who did Free Solo, I'm sure many people have seen this documentary, how he free soloed El Capitan, like no harness. There's moments that were harrowing, and that his hand positioning and foot positioning, he had like this much surface area total to hold his entire body weight up. And if it's like a thumb and a toe, and if he slipped, he would have literally just fallen and died. And he describes how he would do this. He would imagine climbing the entire route, every grip, every single thing he had to do hundreds and hundreds of times in a row in his head. He's as if he's on the side of the mountain. And it's not just like seeing yourself be awesome and successful. It's just a realistic, as realistic as you can of a visualization. Like he's halfway up. How much fatigue does he have? How much lactic acid buildup does he have? How much do his hands hurt? What are the things? How sweaty is he? Like there's the actual components that would be in play. So you don't just imagine positive things only. You try to imagine the scenarios you'll encounter, so that when you encounter them, you I don't know, either you just are okay with it, or you literally have already passed through that gate, so that you're not confounded by them or panicked, because you have already made a decision in your mind about what to do next and lived it out. So
yeah, and that's what I think any good training does. Like the military comes to mind, right? Like you plan for contingencies, you plan for things to go wrong. So it makes sense that sports or a learning context. It hadn't occurred to me before, but yeah, it makes sense that you would think about what if things don't go as expected, and if you can plan for those before they happen, then you don't have to. You have a reflex almost. That's why people don't freeze like during gunfights in the military. Is like because they've been through it, they've planned for that.
Right.
So if you can plan for that in a sports or work or any type of life context, you plan for things going wrong, then you're less likely to freeze up in the moment, and if you'll be able to overcome it.
This was key for Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympian of all time, when in 2008, during the 200-meter butterfly Olympic final, crisis struck with his goggles filling with water. By the last few lengths, he could see nothing at all, but for years he had visualized every type of race to perfection. His method was to put in a mental videotape and play it out, so much so that he would remember every single stroke. So he trusted his videotape despite racing blind, and ended up breaking yet another world record in that race. And lastly, it reduces your stress and anxiety, which are arguably the main causes of athletic failures, losses, and opportunities squandered. Mental imagery gives us a greater sense of control over events, and that in turn makes us feel safer and more secure in our performance. So how would you do it? There's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all for mental imagery. It really depends on what you're actually trying to achieve with it. But there are three key things that should be at the heart of any good form of mental imagery. It's not enough to just think about crossing the finish line or hitting that game-winning shot. You've got to understand, appreciate, and experience the whole event. If you're a runner, think about every step being taken while sprinting that last 400 meters. Or if you're a football player, think about placing the ball for a free kick, stepping back, taking deep breaths, then stepping forward before striking the ball. The goal is to familiarize yourself with every single aspect of the event so that you can prepare for any sort of permutation and just have a clear roadmap for when that does arise in a real game situation.
So yeah, that's interesting. Like we were just talking about, it's not just visualizing the free throw over and over again a million times in your head. It's kind of the whole context of that, or the whole game even, what brought you there? But yeah, it's kind of, I don't know how to put it, it's kind of a wider context to think about of the whole game rather than the single motion. Because that was kind of my initial thing. It was like, oh, they're just practicing free throws. Like, no, you're practicing the game from the tip off to the to the buzzer at the end. Sorry, forgive me. I don't know all the sports terms, but I think that's
No,
right.
I think it's everything you experience, right?
Yeah. But yeah, my initial thought of the mental visualization stuff was just like for very specific techniques, but it does make sense if you widen that out to the whole game or the whole season or your whole kind of career even, to focus on, how would I put that? Yeah, focus on losing, focus on, all those different things that happen rather than just the one mechanical motion, kind of focus on the whole thing, or at least visualize the whole thing and spend time considering how things might go, how they might go wrong. So that makes a lot more sense to me.
Ideal mental imagery requires as much sensory information as possible. Think of all your different body parts and the different tension in the muscles. Think about your heart beating in your chest and what it feels like to connect with a ball or a surface. You also want to clearly see the target you're focusing on from a first-person perspective, whether that's a hoop, a goal, or a finish line. And also hear the screams of teammates or crowd members. Even go as far to use your remaining senses. So if you're a swimmer, imagine the smell of chlorine from the pool, and all other athletes can taste the sweat running down onto their lip. And then to cement things, feel the excitement, the relief, the joy at achieving the successful moment you're visualizing. This rewards the brain and makes it form positive associations to the experience, which reinforces a learned response, a form of psychological conditioning, which means you'll be primed to replicate the same desired behavior in your next performance.
Yeah, so I guess he's just talking about dopamine hacking, basically. Like you've already taught yourself to reward yourself for something you've seen go well in your head, or a behavior you've seen complete itself correctly, so that the next time you see the opportunity to perform that behavior, you're a little more enthusiastic to do it, and or confident is another word for that, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Don't be tempted to fast forward things. You want to play out things exactly how they would pan out, because otherwise it doesn't allow your brain to really fully experience it and make those associations. And because of that, you won't then experience any of the benefits that we've already discussed. And when trying this out the first few times, you may experience just naturally fast forwarding things. But think back to Michael Phelps and his videotape. He would rewind if necessary to start the race again in his mind, but he would then play it out stroke by stroke to the exact second he actually swam in real time. So from these tips, hopefully you can see that, like anything else, mental imagery is a skill, and that means it needs focused, deliberate practice. It's not about just imagining the finish line or the successful moment. That's not going to work. Proper mental imagery is hard work, and that means most people are not going to bother to do it. But if you do it, that is what is often going to give you the mental edge over your competitors. That's a wrap on mental imagery. Let me know in the comments below if there are any other key mental skills you'd love to see a future video made on. Thanks ever so much for watching. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.
Nice. Shout out again to Sam Martin. Cool video.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah. So yeah, we didn't. I don't know how much we got into this, but yeah, so this doesn't have to be just sport, right? So it can be. Actually, how much time do you have? Alex has to take a break in a minute.
Before I have to step out for about 3 minutes, I'll be back in about 3 minutes after that. So.
All right.
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Do you want to? Because I just want to get into a little bit of how this applies outside of sport, right? Because I don't.
Well, do you want to give your example, or want me to give my example first?
I don't have a good one. What's yours?
Oh well, I have two ideas. One is an example. I mean, one is simple. Not I always took on a new job, and you work in restaurants, and each menu item, you have to memorize the menu items, and the menu items, if you're in the cooking in the back of the house, has a system to it and order of operations to it. So, and there's a moment when you're actually working under pressure and you have to do things really quickly. You can't be confused about what's being called and what to do, especially when there's lots of things coming in. So one way of dealing with that is I would literally, after I'd done the work of memorizing the menu a little bit, or the basic compositions of each item, I use flashcards to do that. I would literally, on the flashcard, I would have, it wouldn't be like the menu item name. It would be in quotes with exclamation point, as if the expediter was yelling it out, like whatever that thing was. And I have to close my eyes. And then I don't just rattle off what's in the dish. I step myself through all the motions I take specifically. Like does a pan go down? What am I grabbing? Am I reaching into low boy to grab something? What's going in what order? How long is it going to be there? Where are there plates I have to pull down? What are the motions to finish the plate? Do I spin around and put it back in the pass? So I'd actually step through that, and that was my way of doing flashcard memorization for the new restaurant I was working at. So it helps you be more prepared.
You think that
Yeah.
helped? I mean, did you notice kind of concrete benefits?
Yeah, both, because I tried it the other way first, where I was just memorizing like the as words, like what was in each dish, and then I found when the actual during service, when the expediter would be calling stuff out, I'd still get confused or still fall down, because in that moment the dish wasn't the words on the menu copy. The dish was the things in front of me, and the dish either existing or not existing had to do with the motions I was going to make and the choices I was going to make between her calling that out and me producing it. So there's the ideas, and then there's the thing. So I was practicing doing the thing in my head instead of just memorizing what it was on paper. So yeah, I think it did help me memorize learn my station quicker. I think I probably would have struggled for another month longer had I hadn't done that. And yeah, I think it's good. It does take a little bit of effort. It's for me at least. I found it pretty awkward to do the first couple of times I sat down. It's strange for some of it's getting rid of your sense of disbelief that it could be effective. You find yourself talking yourself out of it, and even when you're doing it, it's like, this is so useless. What am I even doing? Some of it's just the difficulty of actually focusing, like anything else. It's hard to get distractions out of your head and actually pull up like a clear image of what you're doing. But yeah, I found that
I imagine your meditation practice came in handy just for that focus angle, just being able to sit down, have some uninterrupted thoughts.
That's what I tell myself. It probably did, but there's still a great deal of resistance, like mental resistance you have to get over.
That makes sense. All right. We got to take a break. Alex has a sick dog, unfortunately, but we'll be right back with another video. Just give us a minute. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, sorry about that. Alex has a recovering dog who I hope he's doing better, right, Alex? For the viewers who at home want to know.
He needed to be tended to and handed off to somebody who could take care of him well.
Okay.
Yeah, he's good now. He's all good. He's happy. He's smiling. His tail's wagging.
Great. Yeah, so visualization, very powerful tool.
Yeah,
And,
I think we had another video, right, to watch about
Yeah.
an example of a Olympic athlete who does this. You can kind of see them do it in real time, right?
Yep. So this is Alex Diebel, I think is how it says. He's an Olympic, two-time Olympic snowboarding a one-time medalist, bronze, unfortunately, but two-time Olympian. He played in Beijing.
He's only the third best in the world.
Oh, we lost Alex. Give us 1 second. Sorry, technical difficulties again. 1 sec.
I need to fix something later, but I know what it is. But we don't talk about it right now.
All right, because we're live. So yeah, so this is Alex
Yeah.
Diebold, Olympic. You were saying he's what, one of the best? What?
Just you were saying he was a bronze medalist and smirking at that, and I was like, yeah, he's
Oh,
only
no.
the third best in the planet of what he
I wasn't
does.
smirking. I was just I had his bio up, so I just wanted to share his stats. But yeah, he's got a good video on how he does this. Yeah, he's definitely a better skier than I am. I'm sure of that.
I usually kind of do this like off to the side, away from everybody, sort of in my own quiet space. When you're in the gate and you're standing there getting ready to drop, it is the most present, hyper-focused moment of my entire life. I've just sort of buckled my snowboard on. I can feel the pressure of my straps on my ankles. Is it snowing or is it sunny? Is there wind on my face? I reach over to the gate. I make sure the handles are adjusted to the right height. I'm looking at the top of the start gate, just waiting for it to move, trying to feel what that adrenaline's like. The gate opens. I can hear it. It makes like an audible click. I imagine like the exhale of my breath, because you're holding your breath. And when you pull, you're pulling as hard as you can and trying to generate as much speed. And so it's like this exhale and react. I have to move really quickly over the first two features. It's real target shooting. You really have to like barely pick your feet up and over. I can hear the wind going through my goggles.
It's interesting. You could tell how. So I think this is obviously a skill. Like the whole visualization thing seems like it's a skill in of itself, right? As you were mentioning before, it can be hard to kind of get there and focus and stay there, almost like meditation. But you can tell by the way he talks about it that he has definitely done this a million times in his head, right? He's talking about the wind and every sense, and like in the previous video, the whole body. So like tape, smell, touch, taste, everything, like what everything sounds like, what everything feels like. So yeah, it's interesting to see how in detail he gets, because he's ridden the snowboard his whole life, I imagine, and he's done these runs a million times, but he's also done them maybe even more in his head, or just as many times in his head, which is interesting, and that comes out in the way he describes it.
Yeah, I got the same impression. Yeah, you can tell it's very familiar and fluid talking about this. I totally believe that this is something he does, and I totally believe when he does it, he sees everything he's describing. So yeah,
there's something there for, even if you're not into sports, or even if you're not thinking about learning, like there's something there just about like storytelling, almost like he's telling an interesting story, I don't know, there's something there about, obviously this is exciting, doing a Olympic run on a snowboard, but if you take anything you do and visualize it to this extent, I imagine it comes out as some sort of, and you tell someone about it, I imagine it would come out as an interesting story. That's completely unrelated to the topic at hand, but I think there's something there.
Oh, you're talking about storytelling, like as if
Yeah, I mean,
tapping into having a good storytelling ability.
well,
Yeah,
yeah, but that more than just like being able to tell a good story, it like um I don't know, something in your brain kind of organizes it into a narrative, which our brains are very good at doing. But he's obviously practiced at that, and I don't know, it just seems like a good skill. If like I'm not good at telling stories, for example, but it seems like the visualization when you actually go through it. Maybe he's just a very good storyteller. I don't know, but I imagine it has to do something with the visualization, and that enables him to describe this process so well. So yeah, that's just another interesting aspect to this whole thing that just kind of popped in my head.
that is interesting. Yeah, connecting those dots. Yeah,
Sort of feel it on my eyes. Going probably 40 miles an hour through there. I'm jockeying for position, making sure that my body position's really good. I know people are going to be trying to crowd my space. If you're driving a car and you have a 5-lane road and 6 cars and you're all trying to fight to go the fastest, you're going to hit each other. You're going to bump against each other. You're going to trade paint. Rubbing is racing, being close to each other. That's the chaos. Like if you slip up in the first corner, your day could be done. It's like first round, first run. I always imagine taking a pretty big, deep breath. You're about halfway through the course. A lot of times you can hear like an edge running through the snow or somebody coming up short on a jump. My heart rate's going through my roof. If there's a competitor in front of me, I'm staying right on their tail and breaking off to the left just at the last second before I go through the last 2 rollers and across the finish line.
So that's an example of, obviously you want to be in first place the whole time, but that's to the earlier video's point of what if something goes wrong? What if you're not in first place? What if you're in second, third, fourth place? And I think these are the Olympic snowboard runs where it's 4 people going at the same time, which are really fun to watch, by the way. But yeah, if you're if you're not in first place, you have to think about that too. You can't just, it's not just thinking about, again, like as we've talked about already, it's not just thinking about the run and making the perfect run. It's like, there are other people there. Like same thing with basketball. There are other people. You can't just make the perfect shot all day long. There's other people trying to stop you from making that shot.
It's not realistic. Yeah.
So they have to be the competition has to be part of the visualization as well. And they might get ahead of you. And then what's your plan for that? And he's got a plan. I'm going to the left. I'm actually going to, what is it? When
follow the
drivers,
draft,
what's it called? Yeah, drafting. Yeah. So draft behind him, catch a little speed, pass him to the left. It's really interesting.
Even when I'm just visualizing it right now, when I cross the finish line, it's this like huge relief. It's like, okay, I made it down safe. I'm going on to the next round. Like, let's do this again. I'm not out there knitting sweaters, you know, like I'm racing border cross because it makes me feel alive and because I love it. It's gnarly. God damn, it's probably, yeah, it's the best drug you can be able to do, so.
And you could tell, no, it's so cool because whatever that drug is, he just got a hit of it just from the visualization. You can see it.
Yeah.
You know, like he even says it. Like, I feel like just from explaining that, I feel like I've just crossed the finish line a little bit, you know, like that's so interesting. Your mind can kind of trick your body in a good way into thinking that you're there. Like you're in the race, you're at the starting line, you're in the race, you're at the finish line. Like,
yeah.
And all the, you know, neurochemicals that come along with that and the ups and downs and the feelings like, and that's also a good way to prepare for that, as was mentioned previously, the stress and anxiety that comes up on game day or whatever, the, you know, competition day. Like you're going to be nervous, but if you've done this rehearsal, then you're ready.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you think about it, an adjacent thing, like if you ever experience like anxiety, you're doing something, you're feeling a lot of anxiety, or the opposite, you are expecting reward. It's your birthday, and there's a party waiting for you or something, and you're excited all day. Like both of those things are examples of you having kind of an image of a possibility that isn't actually manifesting in the moment, and it affecting your state of being, your psychology, your well-being, your subjective state. So it's just another argument for, like, if you think that this is strange or out of pocket, it's not. You're doing it all the time anyway. This is just a conscious decision to do it with imagination instead of just kind of letting events drag you through it on their own. Anxiety and anticipation would be my 2 examples of like everyday versions of, let's call it unwilling or unconscious visualization.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I spent a lot of time visualizing things but kind of in a negative way, like social situations, how things could go wrong, or career, like if you're looking for a job, how you might never get it. So we spend so much brain power visualizing whether we want to or not. So it's important to really focus that energy when you can, if you can, towards visualizing meeting your goals, whatever they may be. It can be completely unrelated to physical, sports, anything, but visualizing what does it actually look like if I win, or if I meet an obstacle, how do I overcome it, rather than stressing about the obstacle. This goes back into the Stoics almost.
Right.
Control what you can. You're going to hit obstacles. Another snowboarder is going to get out ahead of you. It's just bound to happen. But what do you do when that happens? And you can visualize that and use that as practice, so that when you're out in the real world doing whatever it is, you don't get caught like a deer in the headlights when that happens. You're ready for it.
Yeah, and again, I want to remind people or encourage them to try it, because my limited experience has been that you think you'd be sitting down, closing your eyes, and just inventing a light show, like playing cartoons on the backs of your eyelids or something, and it's like it's detached from you, and okay, wow, you can be as fantastical as you want, and how does this help you? That's absurd. But then when you actually go to do it, you feel real constraints. You feel like you're in the moment, and your body has a real sensibility about what its limitations are and how it might move through space if you tried to imagine doing those things. So, yeah, I don't know. I've been talking about doing this for a while. I had a short-lived attempt at doing this. I've done it in small ways with jiu-jitsu. I've done a little bit of technique. Actually, no, I did do that. Actually, hold on. Just a quick anecdote. I was training at a place called Cobrinhas in California very briefly. They had a Groupon, so I could try it out for 10 days. Very, very good school. And they only allow new students to take their fundamentals class, which is just essentially technique drilling with no rolling. And I remember I knew I was only going to be able to do the Groupon because I was in a bad financial spot. I was in transition for like several different reasons, but I wasn't going to be able to sign up. I just wanted to train somewhere, however I could. And I would go home after the class ended, and I would have notes on what the techniques were for the day. And then I'd sit in the patio behind my apartment, and I would close my eyes. I'd go out there physically and lay down. I'd close my eyes, and I'd go through the motions with my eyes closed. I have to remember what the techniques were and step through them. And by the way, if you want to check out our video on learning all the way, there's a lot of overlap here too. The most effective, or the core element involved in deep learning, is recall. No matter the technique, no matter what you're doing, it ends up being a version of recall, which is basically if I walk up to you blind and interrupt you and ask you to answer a question or perform a skill, there's a second we have to close your eyes and like reframe and go, okay, how does that go again? And then if you are able to pull up the details of how that's done and then execute, that's good practice, and that leads to good memory and good skill development. The recall.
Yeah.
So this is both things. It's you stepping through the real situation, giving yourself a simulated way of training without having to be in that space with those objects around you and still benefit. And at the same time, you're actually doing recall in a sense, because you literally have to pull back into memory. What is this again? How would my body be? Where would my feet be? Where would my hands be? What does that feel like? And that work of doing that is essentially fundamentally a memory exercise. You're building skills while you do that.
Yeah.
So it's good. Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm gonna try this. I'm for mountain biking. I know the trails well enough or the one that I ride near me, where I could do this. I could visualize, and especially since it's off season, so I can't ride much until the spring. I think I'm gonna try this with mountain biking, because I can definitely, if I close my eyes now, I can visualize those trails.
But you've read them enough, right? You could probably.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that I have a pretty good memory for like 80% of the ride that I normally do, that I can visualize almost all of it. So that'll be an interesting test. And I'm also thinking about getting into golf a little bit. I think that's one of the sports that's well known for being very compatible with kind of visualization to get this perfect stroke. You know, like the stroke is everything when you're hitting a golf ball. Yeah, I've got a lot of opportunity to try this out.
That's cool. I want to hear what your method is when you derive one or devise one.
Yeah, I'll keep you all posted.
I dropped a detail. I got a little lost. Last piece of my jiu-jitsu example was after I did that, even in the short time I was there, one of the, not the head instructor, but one of the assistant instructors, I was coming in for like my 9th class or something, and you have to sign a little punch card to go in. And he's like, "Hey man, I'm jealous of you." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, you're one of those people that learns this stuff really fast. I have to like do this over and over and over to keep it in my head. And he was a brown belt. So he'd obviously been doing this for like 8 years or something. Or maybe a purple belt. One of the two. 6.
Oh, we're losing Alex.
Person at all.
Hold on. We lost you. Can you repeat the last? He's a brown. He's been at least doing it for 6 years, and then.
Yeah, he was a higher level belt, and he said that to me. Like, I'm jealous of people that learn. You're one of those people that learns things really fast. And I was like, oh. And in my head, I told myself, then this stuff must be working, because I've only had like 8 classes here. I'm very fresh to this.
How long in total were you doing jiu-jitsu at that point, or roughly?
I had done little pockets of it over time. In aggregate, it was probably 3 months worth of classes before I walked in the door there. But also there was like a 6-year gap between any of that and this experience. So it's pretty. Point being, I think this helped me accelerate my learning to a degree that somebody who had been doing the routine, traditional method of just showing up to classes thought that there was something about my personality or my aptitude that was fundamentally different, and that's not the case. So it's a very, very N of 1, very tiny anecdotal example, but it's in my mind. I remember that, so worth trying again.
Yeah. Well, N is much larger than 1 when you take, as like Sam mentioned from the first video, there's been a lot of research into this. So it's not like a woo-woo thing or,
yes.
Yeah, they're all the top athletes are doing this. And I think, the most interesting thing to me is because I'm not a big athlete in general, but I think it can be done with anything in life, as we were talking about, anything you're learning, anything new, anything old even. I might try to apply it to guitar somehow. Give it a try. Let us know what you think.
Like last example, yeah. I think Nikola Tesla had, and again, especially when you're talking about Nikola Tesla, I feel like half of the things that are written about him are apocryphal, and it's hard to tell. But supposedly I can find quotes that would better support it, but I don't have them handy because it's popped in my head. He talked about how he would do all his inventing in his mind. Like, he would sit there and imagine his way through, like in 3D in his head, what the structures look like and how the pieces would work together. And he'd build it in his head before he ever set out to get materials together and build it in reality. And he said that cycle is far faster than a pure iterative process where you're just doing pure trial and error iterations, thinking through the problem. Similarly, again, to use Richard Feynman again, in his book, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, he literally talks about that thinking, and most people don't think through their understanding of fundamental things very well. They memorize by rote known standards, and then they can iterate them, but they don't actually really question why the thing works the way it does to a point where they understand and can visualize, extrapolate the applications of that. And then in doing so, he's like, as a kid, he would be hired in the neighborhood. He made a small side business fixing people's radios, and somebody hired them to come to their house and fix the radio. And he was just pacing back and forth for like 10 minutes with his hands behind his back. The owner that was paying him was like, "What the hell are you doing? You've done nothing. I'm spending money, and you've done nothing to try to fix my radio." And he's like, "I'm thinking." And then he came up with a solution in his head after thinking through like what all the possible problems could be, and if this was the problem, what he'd have to change. Opens the guy's radio up and repairs it. So that's another small anecdote, but it's the power of actually turning things around in your head. Because even if you physically did open up the radio it's the same exact thing. You
Yeah.
have objects in front of you that are artifacts. They only have meaning to the degree you understand what they mean, or you apply meaning to them. If you know nothing about radios, they don't mean anything to you. It's noise when you're looking in the back of the thing. So there's nothing about the objects themselves that make it that or any reason like it would give you more insight into how it works until you start playing with it. But then again, in your head, if you can play with those objects there's no reason there's a difference between playing with them and because that's literally what you would do. You start tinkering, physically manipulating, seeing how they interact. You could do the same thing in your head. So that I don't think there's a huge difference between the two. That's what I'm getting at. Anyway.
Yeah. So it works for intellectual pursuits, creative pursuits, physical pursuits. Yeah. It's a good example.
It should. We should all learn how to do this more. I don't, but I should. Because you laugh it off, right? You laugh it off as it can't be real because it doesn't feel real. But then, anything I'm engaging with in reality, I have to perceive with my mind anyway. It makes sense of there. So why would it be any different? I don't know.
Yeah. And
yeah.
If you, whatever your mind thinks is real, to your mind, so like, yeah, I don't think real is such a solid concept that we can, or at least the borders are pretty fuzzy, I think, when it comes to the mind.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic. It's a whole other.
I think there are books written on that subject. Alex is frozen again. Some issue with his internet. Sorry, we lost you for a sec. Did you say something super profound in the last 10 seconds?
No. Just I'm glad we got to bring this up because I think it's neat, and I think some people know about it, but I think a lot of people don't really know about it. And even among the people who know, I think they probably view it as like a curious artifact of again niche little thing people sometimes do. They don't really explore it. So
yeah, I
don't know. I think it could be. I don't know. I'm done talking. Yeah.
Good point.
Glad we did it.
All right. Let us know in the comments if you've tried this or if you're planning on trying it, or if you've got ideas for future videos. We'd love to hear from you. Shout out again to. Oh man, I lost it. Let me go back to this. All right, real quick.
Mental imagery.
Sam Martin, Peak Performance Channel. Mental Imagery in Sport, the first video. And then the second video we watched was from Brian Kane, Olympic Athletes, Mental Imagery before the snowboard cross gates even open with Alex Diebold. Shout out to them. And if you like the video, and subscribe if you want more. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.